Welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. I am your host, Hallie Dye. We have a great show for you today. Kirby Johnson, who is a licensed counselor and just a very wise woman, is on the podcast today. I cannot wait to share her story. We talk about growing up with this idea of a transactional faith or a legalistic faith and moving towards really realizing what a relationship with Jesus looks like, this moment of healing that she had. I can't wait for you to hear her tell the story. But we also talk about her passion in counseling, her heart for it, for everyone that she meets with, as well as how to navigate relationships with those that we love that struggle with addiction. And we talk about redefining how we view seasons of waiting and what's really true about those. It's packed with so many good things. I can't wait to share it. But before we dive into the conversation, I want to share some partners with you today. Spring is nearly here. Sports season and spring trips are starting to pick up, and that means lots of running the roads for you. Not to worry, Chevron's loyalty program app is here to help. You may have heard people talk about how they're getting discounts on gasoline. Well, this is how. It's super easy to set up, and new users will receive 25 cents off per gallon, up to 25 gallons for the first 5 uses when you download the app. Plus, each time you use the app, you're earning 5 points per gallon that can be redeemed for future discounts, ranging from 5 cents to 50 cents. You can even get additional in-store purchases for earning additional points. Right now, local users are saving 13 cents per gallon. Best part is, the app is completely free to you and very user-friendly. So what are you waiting for? Go to the App Store on your phone, type in Chevron Rewards, and download the Chevron app to start saving today. When you find yourself or a family member in need of an x-ray or a scan, searching where to go is likely the last thing on your mind. That's why you need to know about Northeast Imaging. Northeast Imaging is a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor-trusted and patient-preferred. They offer MRI, CT, x-ray, and ultrasound. They have a friendly staff who is committed to focus on high-quality scans and intentional care to the patient. Plus, they're referring providers. And listen, it doesn't even matter if you're using your health insurance or you're paying cash. Northeast Imaging is almost always more affordable than local hospitals. The facility is conveniently located at 1703 Lamy Lane in Monroe. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. And now, I can't wait to share with you my conversation with Kirby. Kirby, welcome to the Saltworks podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. And for anyone listening, if you do hear background noise, we have some maybe construction going on next door. I don't know. Kirby, I'm sorry.
Tearing down some walls over there.
Could be, as long as it's not ours,
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't come through this wall, I think we'll be okay. But I'm sorry if it's distracting for you too.
I'm good.
For those who don't know you, Kirby, who is Kirby Johnson?
Who is Kirby Johnson?
We sprung that on you right
Yeah.
before we started.
I feel like that's such a loaded question. Let's see. I think the natural thing to talk about is all the things that you do. But that really isn't who we are. So, I mean, I guess first and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus. Love him. That is foundational in my life and who I am. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. I love being an aunt.
Aunt life is the best.
Yes. It's so fun. And then you get them as much as you want, and then you get to give them back
Absolutely.
and go home.
Yes.
I am a counselor. That's a huge part of what I do. And some of that will come out in my story as far as like what led me to that. But yeah, I'm just trying to do the best that I can and follow where the Lord's leading me, and taking it one day at a time.
I love it. I love it. So good. You did not grow up in Monroe.
I did not. No.
So tell us where you grew up and tell us just a little bit about childhood, going to church,
Yeah.
Your family, that dynamic.
So I grew up in a small town. Well, actually, I was born in Houston, Texas. I don't really remember that very much, but we moved to Harrisonburg, Louisiana when I was 2. And so grew up there. Both of my sisters were born there. Very small town in Catahoula Parish. You really don't even know it's there. It's always funny though, because I will bring up Harrisonburg and so many people around here are like, oh yeah, I know where that is. And I'm like, how?
You're lying.
Yeah. But honestly, like when I was there, I couldn't wait to leave, but I'm so grateful that I grew up there. It's everybody knows everybody. Just wonderful place to grow up in. Went to church my whole life. That's where I met the Lord and where my foundation and my relationship with Him started.
Right.
And I do think, like, growing up, I guess so much of who I was very, I must always do the right thing. I will be the best. I will follow all the rules. And being the oldest, I think some of that comes with, just type A personality, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, a lot of that I think played out in how I looked at my relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think it gave me a different, it made it more difficult for it to just be a relationship with the Lord. It was more so like, I genuinely saw God at times as like this person who may strike me down if I do something wrong.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, I think, a legalism in that.
I love that you use the word transactional in your notes,
Yes,
like that is such a good way of stating legalism sometimes. Cause like, sometimes they be like, how do you define it? But like transactional, like I'll keep my part and you keep yours. And anyway, I thought that was a great way to put that.
Yeah, and I think that that related a lot to just my relationships as well. And so it's like I need to do these things in order to be accepted. I have to do certain things in order to be loved. And like I didn't feel very worthy, I guess.
Kirby, are you telling us that's not how it is?
It shouldn't be. No.
No, I think that's so relatable though.
Yes. But like, I mean, I'm trying to think of where to even really start. So growing up, my dad was an alcoholic. And I never really knew that, and very high functioning. And my dad like loved us. There was never like, abuse or anything like that. But, growing up in a small Southern Baptist church, you put on a face, like you don't let people know like when things are hard or, if you're struggling in certain ways. And that may not have been true for everyone, but for me, that's what I felt. And so like if we had something that was going on at home, we didn't let anybody know about that. My mom and my sisters and I are all very, very close and always were. And so I think there was a part of us that like we just dealt with what was happening on our own. And so, that again, I think it played over into different relationships that I had and my relationship with the Lord as well. But I mean, for the most part, like very normal upbringing. We played sports. We went to church every Wednesday, every Sunday, anytime it was open. And just,
yeah.
Did the thing.
Yeah. Okay. So where did you go to college?
At Northwestern.
Okay. So you moved then.
Yes.
And then what did you think, like when you went to college, did you know what you wanted to do?
I thought I did.
Yeah.
Counseling was not even, I didn't even know what a counselor was really back then. So like when I went to school, for one, I was just ready to get out of Harrisonburg, ready to get out of, my home and like do my own thing. And so I started in nursing. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And then I think the other piece that happened for me is I was getting out of a place where I had to follow all the rules and I had to be the best and I had to perform and I had to like, keep all my ducks in a row. And like that kind of all fell away at college. I was like, I can do what I want to do and I don't have to answer to anybody.
Yeah.
And so then I kind of went down a different path. I always say like college Kirby was a different girl. God bless her. And so, but I started in nursing and my grandmother, she ended up having a stroke and she lived in Harrisonburg at that time. Yeah. And I actually came back and helped take care of her a lot throughout college and in the weekends. And then I quickly realized I don't want to do this for other people. And it was very hard. Like we were in and out of the hospital with her a lot. Yeah. And the other part is that the program at Northwestern was you were only there for 2 years. Yeah. And then you went to clinicals and College Kirby wanted to be there for 4 years and have fun. And so I changed my major. Yeah. So then I changed my major to business, and I was an English minor, and I was pre-law.
Mm.
And so I was going to go be a lawyer or get my master's in business,
Yeah.
and that's what I was going to do. So,
Yeah. Did you, like, in this time, did you feel like you were seeking the Lord? Did you feel like you're total, like a little bit? Did you feel like there was frustration with him at that point? Like, how did that feel? Do you remember?
yes, I was not seeking the Lord.
Yeah.
I think my first year, I really strived to do that because I kind of started getting into the party scene, and I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And so really, but I think the other piece for me, because my relationship with the Lord was always so transactional and
Yeah.
legalistic, I didn't understand what an actual relationship with him was.
Yeah.
And so growing up, like, we would have, I have an aunt and uncle who lived in Washington. They were pastors up there.
Yeah.
We were always very close with them. All of
Mhm.
my first cousins are like brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
And Uncle Tim was that person, like, you have somebody that comes and they're like, "How you doing?" You're like, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"No, how are you really doing?" And you're
Yeah.
just like, "Ah." So
Not great.
yes, he was always one of those kind of people.
Yeah.
And so he was over a program in Washington called Anthem. It used to be called Master's Commission.
Mm.
And they would come on like mission trips down to Harrisonburg at times. And even when I was in college.
Yeah.
And like I would watch these people be so on fire for the Lord and like not understand it.
Yeah.
And I would just be confused.
Yeah.
Or even like hearing people use like, "Oh, I'm just so in love with Jesus." And I'm like, really? Like, because I
Mm.
was in this state of somewhat being afraid of the
Mm.
Lord. Like I knew I needed him, and I knew that Jesus had saved me, and that was the way to heaven, and he had
Mhm.
paid for my sins, all that. But like I did not understand what loving him meant,
Mm.
and that he could love me in that way
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. And so that confused me, and it
Yeah.
also like scared me because I'm like, am I even really saved?
Mm.
But I kind of like took a little rabbit trail there.
No,
But
but I think that can add to those feelings of like unworthiness, because when you don't know what you don't know and you hear everyone else talking about him in this way, you're like, well, he just hasn't revealed that to
right.
me. Like he hasn't pursued me in that way, or, like it
Yeah.
can feel like a lack of, I don't know if the word is favor, but in some ways,
Yes.
and I mean, I know a big part of me going to counseling was I knew the Lord was good. Like I
Mhm.
knew he was the good shepherd, but I had this mental block of like, is he my good shepherd? Like,
Mhm.
is there that personal piece,
Right.
and like,
Yeah.
let's normalize going to counseling for your relationship with the Lord. Like
Yeah.
go to counseling for any other relationship,
Right.
and so, but like I can relate to that
Mhm.
piece. And I also think like, and I don't know, I don't want to put words in your story, but I also think like when you have a transactional view, which so many of us do, I had a lot of legalism going into college.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that not only can you view like, okay, I'm keeping my side of things, and eventually that feels exhausting,
Yes.
but also when you hit trials and this thing over here has not gotten better, and you allowed this to happen with my grandmother, and like you haven't given me a purpose in life, or you haven't given, whatever that looks like, can feel like, well, you didn't keep your end,
Yep.
and so
No, that's exactly what happened to me, because with the loss of it was really the loss of my uncle, my grandfather, and my grandmother that all happened at the same time. And then my junior year in college, my best friend was killed in a car accident.
mm,
And she was, in growing up, when you feel like you can't really talk to anybody or let people know what's really happening at home, she was that one person for me.
yeah,
And so when that happened, I was mad.
mm,
I mean, you want to talk about angry with the Lord?
yeah,
And that was really a point, I think, in my life where I was like, okay, I've done all these things. I've held up my end of the deal. You have not. Like, I'm done.
yeah,
And really walked away from him completely.
yeah. And like Kirby, like for the people listening, like when that's your understanding of relationship with the Lord, like that, those feelings are valid. Like
Yeah.
when that's what you
Yeah.
think
Yep.
has happened. And I think so many people operate that way and they don't realize that's their beliefs.
Yes. Yeah.
So when was it that you moved to Olympia? Is that right?
Mm-hmm. So kind of back on the Anthem Masters Commission people,
Yeah.
there was I can't remember. No, I had one more semester left of college, and they were all coming down to Harrisonburg for like part of their mission trip.
Yeah.
And this was probably, I don't think it had even been a year since Courtney had passed. Or no, it was that summer after Courtney had passed. So only like 3 months. So I wasn't having it. I didn't want to see Uncle Tim because I knew he was going to make me cry and try to talk to me.
I am fine.
Yes, I'm fine. And so, I mean, this sounds terrible, but the day we were supposed to go home for that, my sister was working, I was off. So I went with a bunch of friends. We went to the pool, drinking, doing whatever. She had to come and get me. And she was like, Kirby, we're supposed to be, going home. And I was like, nope, not going. So anyways, they drugged me there. And it
Sisters.
was, yes. She was so mad at me. But I cannot fully explain how broken I was and just running because I knew like the Lord never left me. And so he was still very much pursuing me, and I could feel that, which would make me even more angry of like, no, I don't want to feel conviction. I don't want to feel anything.
Yeah.
And so I went home that weekend, hung out with a lot of the, Anthem students, again, seeing all these people, they're just so on fire for the Lord. And part of me so desperately wanting that. And part of me just like, no, like I can't, like that trusting someone who has let me down so many times feels so scary and just impossible.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of healing moments, I think, that happened for me that weekend, that I still took with me, but, I was still living a life of just, partying, running away, all of that. And then I remember at one point I had just graduated, or it was right before I graduated college, and I was at a friend's house and we were sitting on the porch, and I just was like, clear as day. I was like, I have to move to Washington, and I am going to probably go do this program called Anthem. And so make that make sense. You just graduated from college. You're supposed to start your big girl job, making money, doing all that. And I'm going to go give 9 months of my life and pay to do that, not make any money, and serve the Lord.
Yeah.
And it literally makes no sense. And the amount of peace that I had about doing that was, I mean, it drove me. And I saved money. I worked for the next few months, saved as much money as I could, paid to do that program, packed up, moved across the country, and there I was.
So, okay, I'm not going to get exactly like your wording right, but there was something in your notes about you saying like you knew if this was going, like this was your chance to change your life or save your life or however you stated it. Did you like know that somehow? Like,
yeah, I knew, like I could see the destruction in front of me. Like if I continued on the path that I was going, the Lord was never going to be at the center of my life. And there was a part of me that knew that he needed to be. And I still wanted that. I mean, I still belonged to him. But I was also, there was this idea in me, like if I go to law school, I'm going to learn how to argue truth and, not truth. And so what if I can convince myself that the Lord doesn't exist? That was some of the thoughts that I had. And
that's
so
actually real though. Like, that's very profound that you have that thought, you know?
And knowing like with the state that I was in that I could go that way.
Yeah.
And so, and it's just totally the Holy Spirit, because again, I cannot fully describe the peace and the knowing that I have to do this. And so I did, and I got to Olympia and freaked out.
That is wild. Well, I mean, absolutely, like we already see the faithfulness of the Lord through in and out of everything that you've shared. But I also need to say something kind about college Kirby, and that was she was wiser than you give her credit for. Like she knew some things. She knew what was up, whether she wanted to admit it or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so you move there, you freak out. What does that look like?
I was like, I'm never gonna have fun again. I have like, what am I even doing?
Yeah. What were you doing, by the way?
So it's a discipleship internship type program for 9 months. You're taking different Bible classes. You were literally serving at the church. And I think for me, the main thing that I wanted was I want to I want to be in love with Jesus. And so these people are in love with him. Why am I not?
And here I am doing more, and I still don't understand this foundational
Yes.
piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you are literally like you were serving at the church. You're stacking chairs. You're working at all the services. You go on a huge mission trip at the end of it.
Yeah.
But literally looking back now, I'm like, how in the world did I even end up there?
Yeah.
But we lived in host homes, and so I got to live with Uncle Tim and Aunt Dana, which was
Aw.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Like watching just how they loved each other and their marriage and their kids, and living in their home was amazing. I think that was also very healing for me as well.
Yeah.
Um,
What was because I know that you were there for, did you say 5 years? So longer than you
Planned.
anticipated.
Yes.
You mentioned an encounter. At what point was that? And like, can you share that with us?
Yeah. So, I guess when I got to Anthem, when I first got there, I can't fully describe how crippled I was with shame of like everything that I had done over the last 4 years and just how I had lived my life and decisions that I had made. And I had really sacrificed everything that I thought was good about me. And so shame was eating me alive, which shame is, it is a living thing that feeds on our negative beliefs and thoughts and will keep us from being able to function in the way the Lord wants us to. And so it probably took that entire 9 months for me to actually be able to forgive myself for what I had done and being able to accept the Lord's forgiveness, because he forgives us, but if we can't accept it and we're constantly trying to strive against it, it just doesn't work.
Oh, I wish I could remember a Tim Keller quote that I read recently, but it was something about like when we refuse to forgive ourselves, it's basically saying there is an idol that you're serving whose approval is more important than God's, and it's like, your thoughts, your standard. He's also said before, like, we all have these standards we feel like we have to live by. And he was like, even if God operated by your standards, we still wouldn't.
Right.
None of us would still wouldn't meet our own.
Yeah.
know, and thankfully that isn't how he operates at all.
Praise the Lord.
Yes.
So one of the things that was different about this church is I grew up Southern Baptist, and so like prophesying or words from people giving you words from the Lord or pictures or something that they had, that wasn't a common thing.
Yeah.
And it was here. And so when I first got there, some of the pastors on staff, they would be praying over us or be like, I just have a word that I felt like the Lord wanted to share with me, which, a prophecy is something that's edifying and brings comfort and encouragement.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very weird. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so my uncle was like, just keep a journal, like write everything down. And so, and obviously I was also very stubborn. So even just believing any of this was very difficult for me.
Yeah.
And
where's the fact?
Yes, exactly. And so one of the pastors on staff, she came to me and this was in the very beginning. And she told me that she had a word for me. And so I wrote it down, and it was just a picture that she had, and she saw me in a field, and I had like all these small light white butterflies that were just like covering me. And she said it was just like a very tight ball, and that as time passed, she could see them getting lighter and just like flying up, and like it was a release. And so she just felt like the Lord was trying to say, like, you're holding on to so many things, and over time, like, you're going to be able to let that go, and you're going to be able to feel a freeness, or the burden will be lifted. And so, originally I was like, okay, that's pretty.
Yeah.
And so, but I really struggled with that the whole time I was there. It's just like I could not get through. His forgiveness could not get through to me.
Yeah.
So at the end of the program, we're in the Dominican Republic, and we're on a mission trip, and we're going to different communities and speaking. And one of the things that I had to speak on was forgiveness. And I was like, I remember being in the bus, and we were on the way there. We were going to a Haitian village that's in the DR. And I just had started freaking out. And I was like, I can't talk on this. I'm not forgiven. I don't believe I'm forgiven. I can't speak on forgiveness. Like, this will be hypocritical.
I hear, guys, in theory.
Yeah. It's great, but I can't. And so I'm just like having a moment with myself. And then I look out the window. We're on the bus, no AC. Everybody's like sweating to death. And I see a little butterfly that's like flying out on the window. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. Okay. And then I see more and more. And then, like, after about 5 minutes, we are literally surrounded by small white butterflies. And then this has been 7 months since that pastor had given me that word. And so it instantly came to mind. I flipped through my journal and I find it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And in that moment, it was just like, I am forgiven. And because I'm so stubborn and can't like just take these words that people have given me or that the Lord's given me, like he gave me an actual picture to see. And so I was talking to Kirsten. She was one of the missionaries that we were working with. And I was telling her what was going on. And she told the bus driver, she was like, stop. And so like they pulled the bus over and we stopped and got out. And we were probably there for like 2 hours with these butterflies just like surrounding us. And we ended up standing, we were kind of like on the side of a cliff a little bit, and the beach was out here and there were some mountains, but we were just all like surrounded by these butterflies. It was crazy.
That is amazing.
It was insane. And like in that moment, like I have never gone back to ever feeling like I wasn't forgiven.
Wow.
And so that was a huge turning point for me. I went to that Haitian village and I spoke on forgiveness.
Guys, it's true.
Yeah.
But like, what a beautiful thing that the Lord reached outside of the bounds of what Kirby felt like she needed. She felt like she needed fact. And he was like, no, I'm going to give you this experience you can't dispute, or reason away. And I also like want to point out, because I think like, in some places that can be so common and even abused, like given, I have a word for you, or, like,
oh yes, prophecy. Absolutely.
And then places where it's like, okay, I don't want it to be unwise, so I'm just like not even gonna entertain that at all. Like, it can be like, how do I hold this well? Like when someone and I feel like you illustrated exactly how to hold that well. Like someone saying to you, just journal it and put it away.
Yeah.
I remember hearing Jackie Hill Perry talk about when someone said something to her early on, before she was known, before she probably wrote her first book, I think, about like, I see this in your future and I see this in your future. And it was like stuff that she was like, okay, okay. Yeah. And she just journaled it. Like, I think somebody told her something similar, like just journal it, put it away. And she did. And she was like, I've learned like with things like that, put it away. And she used the example of Mary, like she would treasure things about Jesus in her heart. Like we see that a couple times in scripture. She'd treasure those things in her heart because like until it comes to fruition, it's just a word from a person.
Right.
But when you put it away and you're like, okay, I'm going to put it here. If it doesn't come, like my hope's not in that.
Right.
But if it does, then like, okay, this was the Lord. That, I think that is the beautiful picture that you painted of holding that with wisdom.
Yeah.
And what an amazing story.
It definitely, I just treasure that story too. I mean, because how gracious the Lord was in that moment of like, I'm going to give you this. And I go back to that constantly. And even I pulled out my journal and like reread it again. And I was just like, man, like his goodness, he's so faithful in all of those things. And that was 15 years ago. Yeah. That is wild.
15 years ago and nowhere near home.
Nowhere near home.
No. And him giving you the provision you needed for the task you had. Like he is so faithful to provide.
And it was also another, because I mean the plan was I was going to return back to Louisiana and go get my MBA or go back to law school, whatever. But in that too, I just felt a sense of like, I'm not done here yet. Like the Lord's not finished with me here yet. And that's kind of what kept me there for another 4 years. I actually worked on staff at the church and worked with the Anthem program. And that kind of led me into counseling a little bit. But Yeah. So,
Wow. That's beautiful. When did you know that you wanted to do counseling? So you stayed. What did that look like? Did you go to counseling? And I mean,
no.
how-
Probably should have. Well, so what happened was though, like working with the Anthem program, it's college age students, some a
Yeah.
little bit older.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing a lot of, we'll just say, like pastoral care. I was
Yeah.
working on getting my pastor's license.
Wow.
This is a Foursquare denomination, and so several of us were on staff doing that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that started happening though was so many of the people that I was meeting with and working with, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
man, like you've got some stuff, and this
Yeah.
isn't just we're not just gonna pray it away, you know?
Mm.
And so I was referring people out for counseling a lot. And I was
Yeah.
like, I want to know how to help these people.
Yeah.
And so then I started entertaining the idea of going to counseling,
Mm.
or not going to counseling, but going to grad school.
Yeah.
And one of the only programs that had, or one of the only colleges that had a program that I was interested in for counseling was in Pullman, Washington, which was across the state. And they have a lot of snow in the wintertime. And I was like, I can't do that.
Not for me.
No.
Where are the butterflies?
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, there was a piece of me was like, I think I'm ready to return to Louisiana because I wasn't necessarily sure if I would.
Yeah.
And that also led to some restoration with my dad and our
Yeah.
relationship. And so I felt like it was time to come back. So
I love, like, even when you said, because I didn't know that you were, when you went to college, you were looking at nursing. And I was like, oh, okay, she is going to help with healing, but in a different way,
in a different way. Yes.
So, yeah. So what made you land on Reston for grad school?
Kind of just, I looked at LSU, I was
Yeah.
looking at ULM, and y'all, I had no idea. When I was looking at different counseling programs, there were so many different kinds. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what's the difference? Why is there
Right.
not just one counseling program? There's
Yeah.
this marriage and family therapy and clinical mental health. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, no concept. And so my sister and brother-in-law were living in West Monroe at the time. So I was like, tech's close. And I had decided I wanted to do more of the clinical mental health counseling instead of MFT. I don't even remember now why I chose that,
Yeah.
but ended up in Reston.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
I want to pause that for a minute and talk about your relationship with your dad and that restoration process. Can you kind of talk to us about that? Because you've painted such a beautiful picture of, like, he had this, he was a great father, but I know that there are conflicts there. What did that look like for y'all?
Some of that began in Anthem. My dad and I just did not have a close relationship. And looking back now, I know a lot of that was probably because of the addiction, but also I think my dad just didn't know how to have a close relationship with us. And so one of the things that I did while I was in Anthem is I wrote my dad a letter and ended up actually reading it to him in person when I came home to visit for Christmas, just around like my desire to have a closer relationship with him and hurts that I have had. And it was I was terrified to do that.
Yeah.
But my dad shockingly was so receptive and like thanked me for giving him that letter. And I think it's something that he has kept.
Yeah.
And it did open the door somewhat for us to have a closer relationship. You know, I think addiction gets in the way of any relationship.
Yeah.
And he would tell you that. I mean,
Yeah.
and so in that, just figuring out how to love him and care for him. I think when I did finally go to counseling, that was something that I was able to work through because younger, I would have so much anger towards my dad because I'm like, why? And like, why can't you not be in a bad mood? Like, why do you have to always be upset about something? Like, why do you have to drink? And I think counseling helped give me, and this doesn't happen for everybody, and that's okay. Everybody has their own relationship with loved ones that are addicts, but it did give me a deeper compassion for him. And I was able to see him and the hurts that he has experienced and what his own journey has been. And it's not like you know, I've had conversations with him. He doesn't want to
Yeah.
want to drink. He doesn't want that, and he feels powerless to it. So,
and I mean, from what I understand from friends who have similar stories, like, it can feel personal that you keep choosing this
very
over
personal.
us.
Yeah.
And I think, like, in you saying, like, I was able to have this compassion for what he's gone through and what he's experienced, like, that also takes that personal aspect out, like, that lessens that a little of, like, it really, truly wasn't about me. It wasn't choosing this over me, but I know that's a heavy, hard thing.
Yeah.
Especially when you can't name it.
Right.
Yeah. What does Counselor Kirby have to say? You're like, oh, you were like, yeah, let's go. Yeah, you set up.
Sorry.
That was hilarious. So
she can be two different people.
She straight up set up and said, what is it? Okay, what does Counselor Kirby have to say to someone who is struggling with a loved one who is battling addiction? Like, what encouragement, what truth, what wisdom do you have to say to that person? Like, even in boundaries and your belief of your own self and that.
Yeah. Boundaries is huge. I mean, and I think a lot of times people can look at boundaries as, okay, well, this is how do I cut them out?
Yeah.
Boundaries is how I cut people out.
Yeah.
And it's really not. Like, boundaries is how you maintain a relationship that keeps it safe for you.
Yeah.
And so, you can look at enmeshment. You can look at people who are so intertwined with the addict, they become the enabler or the victim or whatever. And so just with me and my dad, for example, like, I love him. I have a relationship with him. It's not the relationship that I would want, but it is the one that keeps me in a state of, like, I'm protecting myself as much as I can.
Right. Because he has made these choices,
Yes,
and so
exactly.
it's like, I think that's such a profound truth, because sometimes, like, when you're setting boundaries, it feels like I'm deciding what relationship we've had, but, like, you're not weighing into the fact they've made these decisions.
Right.
So you have to respond to that,
Yes. And in that, like, boundaries, you are teaching people how they can treat you.
Yeah.
And what you're willing to allow them to do.
Yeah.
And boundaries aren't walls.
Right.
Like, we can put a brick wall up and nobody can get through, but then nothing can get through. Like, you block out the bad and the good. And boundaries are permeable. Like, you can set some really strict boundaries, and then depending on how that relationship changes and how you feel, whether you feel safe to extend those boundaries or not, they can. And your relationship with people, that can go through seasons of that, where, like, hey, we're going to need to have a little bit more firmer boundaries currently, and we can revisit that in a month or so. And so, I think if you are married to an addict, that's just a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
And very, very hard. If you're not in counseling, get in counseling. Like, you need to seek a professional that can help you navigate that, and someone who wouldn't be biased. I mean, I think family members are great supports, but man, they have a bias towards that entire situation.
Right.
And so,
whether they want to see you just, like, cut the ties, you be free, or they love this other person so much that they're encouraging you to enable, like, it can go both ways.
Yes.
Yeah. That's so true. And there's just something powerful too, like, having been to counseling, where there's this third party person that does not have to say the things they're saying. Like, I am so good at discounting what Andrew says, and, like, like, he's not lying, but I'm like, you have to say that, and it's terrible, but when you go somewhere else, like, for some reason, like, there is, it brings credence to this truth, because they didn't have to.
Yep. And knowing it's that unbiased perspective is so helpful.
Yeah.
I think I answered all of your question.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. You did so well. Okay. I would love to hear, I want to talk about waiting seasons before you go, because I know you have stuff today, but I would love to hear just a little bit about your counseling journey, because, I mean, it's a huge part of your life, and you're passionate about it. I mean, it's your ministry, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not all of your life's work, but it's a lot of it, you know, just whatever you want to share about
Yeah.
that.
Um, I think for me, when for one, I feel one of my, I don't know if burden is the right word, but
Mhm.
my drive is
Mhm.
to help people not live the way I was living for so long,
Yeah.
of crippled by shame, like
Mhm.
having zero identity in Christ and just floundering, trying to find something to make you feel whole, something to make you feel good or whatever.
Yeah.
And trauma and shame and hard relationships, all of those things keep
Mhm.
us from walking in freedom
Yeah.
and who the Lord wants us to be.
Right.
And I'm so, so passionate about that. And I see people every day come into my office and
Mhm.
just like weighed down
Yeah.
by this world or their past and feeling like there's no way out. And there is.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work to be able to
Mhm.
dig deep and
Yeah.
let go of some of these things, because then we become defined by that. And
Right.
when we get used to living in a certain way,
Mhm.
trying something different is terrifying and we don't
Right.
know how to function in that. Um, and so, but I've just seen how people just the change that can happen when they
Yeah.
actually are able to lay things down and not be so defined by their past or so defined by what has happened to them, but
Yeah.
finding a new future, a new
A new way.
yes.
Mm.
Um,
That's so good. And I think that, like, it's so powerful hearing that from you because we've talked about counseling a lot of times in different episodes, whether it's been something we've shared or a guest, but hearing you say that's your heart, because I know for a lot of people, it's like, what is counseling? You know, like, but like hearing your heart in it and like why you sit on that side of the debt, you know, or that side of the room, or,
yeah,
you know, like the passion that you bring, like that feels welcoming. I
yeah,
mean, it has to for someone who's like, I don't know, should I go? You know,
yeah. And it's hard to go. Like
it
when
is.
I
It's weird when
called,
you start.
yes, when I called, well, vulnerable thing.
Yeah.
I'm telling myself a little bit. I didn't call to schedule my counseling appointment. Emily Jones did, and yes, I will say her whole name. We were literally at lunch, and she calls and pretends that she's me, and to schedule this appointment, and I'm like, oh,
Is she gonna have
okay,
her license revoked for this?
yeah. So,
Good old Emily.
oh yeah, she just kind of pushes us in
Yeah.
ways we need to go. So, and I know I needed to, but just to actually make that,
I can hear her say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I did do
yeah, yeah.
that."
It was funny though because they would ask a certain question and then she'd be like, "What's your date of birth?" And but
That's
sometimes we just need that friend to kind of,
for sure.
yeah. So,
Yes.
but it's intimidating to do that. It's
It
it's
is.
scary, and so
Yeah.
even as going in as a counselor, going to
Mhm.
counseling is hard.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and even like I think because when you call, you kind of have to give your reason, you
yeah,
know, and you're like, I don't know.
I know.
What is my reason?
I
You
know.
know? And
I
like
need help.
whatever, yes, help. Um, whatever reason you give them, that's not the reason.
Oh,
You know, and
no.
they know that. So
Yeah.
just tell them whatever.
Yeah. Somebody said I needed to come.
Yeah.
So here we are.
This is actually Emily Jones.
Yeah.
She just needs to be there. Um No, that's good. Okay. Before we end your episode, which has been amazing, I would love for us to talk about um waiting seasons.
Hmm.
How, first of all, how would you define, because I think we hold some misconceptions. We
Yes.
toss those words around a lot, and there's a lot of implications with those words.
Hmm.
Like almost as if there's nothing going on, there's no growth, there's no joy.
Yes.
That your hope is in the thing that you consider yourself waiting
For.
on. Yeah.
Yes.
So, can you just talk about your how you view those words even?
Yeah. No, that's so good, Hallie, because you're already like going where my brain's going.
Perfect.
I think just one of the big, I mean, I guess one of the most easiest ones that people look at is like you're waiting for your spouse
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And at least I hear that a lot being 38 and still single. But I think one of the things that just frustrates me so much is that when you hear people talk about waiting seasons, their whole body changes. It's like, well, I'm in a season of waiting. And it's just this forlorn, like just,
Yeah.
sadness. And that's not how scripture describes waiting.
Mm.
Because what that is more of like I'm pining for something because there's been a loss or a grievance or whatever. I don't have what I'm wanting, so I'm waiting.
Right.
But if you actually look into specific scriptures where it's talking about waiting on the Lord, it's supposed to be with excitement.
Yeah.
And there was an example that I heard a pastor give one time that I just loved and I've held on to it. But if you think about when you're playing hide and seek with your kids or your
Mhm.
nieces or nephews, whatever, you're hiding and like you're representing Jesus or the Lord or whatever that gift is that he has for you. And the kids are
Mhm.
trying to find you. And like they're excited. They're on their own little journey trying to
Mhm.
figure out where you are. And you may like throw out a noise
Yeah.
every now and then to give them a hint and they kind of
Right.
redirect and go. And then when they find you, it's just like this excitement of like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, you're here. Like you found me. And like
Yeah.
everyone's excited. And so that is my picture of a waiting season and how it's supposed to be because we know the end result is going to be good.
Right.
And there's a journey for us to get there and there's so many things for us to learn on the way.
Mm.
And that's how it's meant to be. And it's not this thing that the Lord's withholding from us,
Right.
but there is a gift that he has for us in his timing and when it's right. And so
Yeah.
like I could sit here at 38 and just be like, which, 24/7, I'm not always just so excited about waiting.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when my mind is right and
Yeah.
I'm, aligned with him, like there
Mhm.
is excitement in that because I know that whenever I get to this next step or this thing
Mhm.
that he has for me, it's going to be good and it's
Yeah.
something that he has for me in the right time. And so that's just my encouragement around waiting seasons.
Shoot, that was so good because I feel like just last night I told Andrew, 10 years ago, um, we were celebrating, your grandmother's 80th birthday, and we're about to go today to Kirby, Texas,
Oh,
and celebrate her 90th. And 10 years ago, I was writing my blog about waiting to be pregnant. We'd had loss. We'd had months and months and months of nothing,
mm,
nothing wrong, but also
yeah,
no answer. And,
yeah,
just didn't know was it possible,
yeah,
and I had a blog where I kept, those sentiments and, just there were definitely sweet things, but I was absolutely defined by
mm,
that season of waiting,
yeah,
and I processed that on the blog and stuff of I'm going to write a list of everything that I have in this season that I won't have when I'm a mom,
yeah.
which is checked out. uh, but, so I did have some of that, but I was here we are 10 years ago driving back with a minivan of 3 kids.
Mm,
I'm
yeah,
launching a book on motherhood.
yeah,
Just if you could have told Hallie died 10 years ago where we'd be, and now I'm in this season of harvest, and I'm having to teach myself how to celebrate Kirby
yeah,
because
mm,
we don't always wait well. And so when it comes, we're like, oh, I don't know, this is too good to be true,
right,
and
yeah,
it's no, when they had harvest seasons, it was a multiple day festival,
yeah,
and it was part of the law. You will have this,
right,
I think it was the festival of ingathering or something like that, they were commanded to have this, and
right,
it's we don't do that well, and I think a lot of it's because we don't always know how to wait well,
right,
you know.
yeah. Because it's something that we feel that we're entitled to, or like,
Yeah, yeah.
why are you punishing me if I don't have this yet?
100%.
Yeah. And that's just, and if we know the heart of God, like that's not what it is.
Right.
And so his his sovereignty and his
Mhm.
goodness is my word for this year, which you
Mm.
used in our prayer before we even started.
Oh,
And so like I guess that would also be my challenge in your seasons of waiting is finding
mhm.
what the his goodness in
Yeah.
that because you can always without a doubt
Mhm.
take the moment that you're in right now, look back
Yeah.
and see where his faithfulness has been true, all
Mhm.
of the goodness that he has given, and trust that that is in your future as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's when your hope, of happiness and fulfillment and wholeness is in this thing
Right.
that you're waiting, then it does feel like he's withheld his favor.
Oh, yeah.
But when you realize like he has a plan that's bigger than you could even imagine,
Yeah.
you know, and it's for your good and it's for others' good and it's for his plans good, you know, like
Yeah.
all of these things. I keep hitting my mic, and all of these things, and you realize like he's not withholding good from you. You're just staring at this one thing,
Right.
waiting for it to change. But like he's over here doing this and unfolding that and providing healing here. And
Right.
I mean, you know, like there's so much goodness, but
and just the growth that happens in your relationship with him and that.
absolutely.
Like you can miss out on all of that
Right.
when you don't focus on it. I love to scare little, young 20-year-olds that are just like, I just don't know where my husband is.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, let me tell you something, which they look at me and they're probably like, dear Lord, please don't let me be 38 and still be single.
Definitely not.
But I'm like, hey, if your focus is solely on you finding a husband and you can't answer the question of what if he doesn't bring that, are you still okay? Like, am I good? Is the Lord enough? Because if he's not, then that husband sure as heck ain't gonna be enough. And so like we have to be able to ask ourselves those kinds of questions, whether it's a husband or a baby or whatever.
That's what I was going to say. That's how I feel whenever people are like, I know he's going to bring me a baby, because I'm like, well,
but what if he doesn't?
What if he doesn't,
Or it looks different than you think it would.
Yes, because here it is. And I am so grateful, and I do need to celebrate and rejoice in the things that look different 10 years from then. But at the same time, like, he would still be good if none of that had happened.
Right.
And when our definition of his goodness and his faithfulness and sovereignty hinge on that,
yeah,
that's not the proper theology. I know so many good people that did not get the answer to their prayer that they had hoped.
Right.
John the Baptist.
Yeah.
It didn't end well the way we would define good.
Right.
But he was healed and whole.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
like, I mean, and so I just think like, our theology sometimes goes through such refinement in those places where you realize like my hope is in you alone.
Right. Yep.
So Kirby, man, it was so good. Thank you.
It was fun.
It was fun.
Thanks for having me.
We laughed. We teared up. I did. I don't know if you did. Okay. We threw Emily Jones under the bus.
Yes.
All in all, a success.
I'll try to warn her.
No, it'll be fun. Let's just let it come out.
Yeah.
Kirby, seriously, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
it was
thanks so much for having me.
Extremely powerful and so good.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thank y'all so much for listening in this week on the Saltworks. We will see you next week.
This is my story. This is your story.